You get an email from your boss. The subject line just says, "We need to talk."
Oh, yeah. That's just the worst feeling.
Right. In a fraction of a second, your heart rate spikes, your vision narrows, and your higher level logic completely shuts down. You haven't even opened the message yet, but your biology is reacting as if a literal predator just walked into the room.
It really is. It's the ultimate biological hijack. Your autonomic nervous system just goes into a full threat response.
Today, we are reverse engineering that exact moment and giving you the tools to stop it.
Because in that state, your brain prioritizes sheer survival over rational thought. You
Yeah.
cannot outthink that state.
No, you really can't.
You have to physically dismantle it and then, rebuild your baseline response from the ground up.
Exactly. And we have a massive stack of research today to help you do exactly that. We're pulling from ancient Stoic philosophy, neuroscience protocols from the Huberman Lab, the psychological framework of radical acceptance, and the latest sleep science.
We're even looking at how corporate giants manipulate human habit loops, which is, well, it's slightly terrifying, but so useful.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. The mission of this deep dive is to take you from overwhelmed and reactive to proactive and entirely in control.
The best place to start is right there in the muddy waters of acute panic. Before we can talk about long-term rewiring, we have to look at why humans suddenly choke under pressure.
Right, because everyone's experienced that at some point.
Absolutely. The research we have from mindful.org points to a really fascinating mechanism regarding attention and overanalyzing. Think about a highly skilled athlete, like a competitive golfer.
Okay, so someone who's practiced the exact same motion thousands of times.
Exactly. The mechanics of their putting stroke are deeply ingrained in specialized automatic motor networks in the brain. They don't need conscious thought to execute the physical movement.
But the moment they are scaring down a tournament-winning putt,
Yeah.
conscious thought invades that space, right?
Yes, they start focusing on like the angle of their wrist or the exact placement of their feet.
Which is exactly what they shouldn't do. They're forcing the prefrontal cortex to interfere with those automated pathways, which creates a sort of neural gridlock.
That gridlock is what we call choking. You have relevant thoughts, like execute the stroke, competing for the exact same cognitive bandwidth as irrelevant thoughts.
Like, what if I miss and ruin my career?
Precisely. The brain overloads, and you cannot reason your way out of this overloaded state because the part of your brain responsible for reasoning is the exact part causing the interference.
I mean, I've tried deep breathing when I'm caught in that anxiety spiral, and honestly, sometimes it just makes me feel dizzy and, well, more panicked.
Yeah, standard deep breathing can actually backfire if you're hyperventilating. But the neuroscience protocols we pulled from the Huberman Lab detail a very specific physical intervention. It's called the physiological sigh.
Right, and it's not just taking deep breaths. It's a mechanical override for the nervous system.
It really is. You take a deep inhale through the nose, immediately followed by a second shorter inhale to maximally inflate the lungs, and then you do a long, slow exhale through the mouth.
What makes that double inhale physically different from just gasping for air?
Well, it comes down to the microscopic architecture of your lungs. Your lungs are packed with millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli, which facilitate the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide.
Okay, so they're like tiny balloons.
Yeah, basically. And under acute stress, those sacs actually begin to collapse. When that happens, oxygen levels drop and carbon dioxide builds up in your bloodstream.
Which I'm guessing sends a distress signal to your brain.
Exactly. It amplifies the panic. That second, sharp inhale mechanically pops those collapsed sacs back open.
Oh, wow. So you are rapidly increasing the surface area in your lungs to offload that built-up carbon dioxide.
You are. And then the long exhale physically slows down the heart rate by signaling the vagus nerve. Doing just 1 to 3 of these physiological sighs shifts the autonomic nervous system out of the sympathetic fight or flight mode.
And right back into a parasympathetic calm state. It's basically the fastest known real-time biological brake system.
It is. And the Huberman materials also point out something interesting. Chronic stress actually makes us overbreathe in our daily lives.
Wait, we breathe too much.
We take too many shallow breaths per minute, which ironically decreases oxygen delivery to the brain and makes us hypersensitive to carbon dioxide.
You can actually test your baseline tolerance for this.
Right.
You take a few normal breaths, you inhale fully, and then time exactly how long it takes to exhale all of that air as slowly as possible.
Yeah, that exhale time gives you a really clear metric of your nervous system's baseline reactivity. To improve it, you use box breathing.
That's inhaling, holding, exhaling, and holding again, all for equal durations, usually like 4 seconds each.
Right. Training that for just a few minutes a week physically conditions your diaphragm. It builds up your tolerance to CO2, meaning your threshold for panic gets fundamentally higher.
That's incredible. But if the respiratory interventions aren't enough to break the spiral, Healthline details grounding techniques that basically hijack your sensory inputs,
Yes, grounding is incredibly effective.
like the 5-4-3-2-1 method. It forces you to work backward. You identify 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you hear, 2 you smell, and 1 you taste.
It forces engagement with the physical world.
Or, my personal favorite, holding a piece of ice and focusing entirely on the intensely cold sensation as it melts against your skin.
I love that one. See, your brain in panic mode is caught in a speculative, catastrophic future. Grounding demands that your brain process intense, immediate physical data.
Right, you can't worry about tomorrow when your hand is freezing right now.
Exactly. It forces your neural resources to pull away from the default mode network where that anxious thought spiral lives and re-anchor in present reality processing.
It's like your brain is a frozen computer monitor, and these physical breathing and grounding techniques are the Control-Alt-Delete that forces a hard reboot.
That's a perfect analogy.
But, once we force that restart and the acute panic is cleared, we have to look at the underlying machinery. Why do some people constantly hit that panic threshold, while others navigate chaos without even blinking?
Well, the physical structure of the brain holds the answer to that. Alexander Olson's research in Psychology Today maps out 2 distinct cognitive systems we use to navigate life.
The proactive system and the reactive system, right?
Yes, the proactive system relies on fluid intelligence. It constantly evaluates the moving parts of your environment and smoothly executes a game plan.
And the reactive system.
That's the emergency backup. It kicks in when you are caught off guard and have to scramble to adapt.
We obviously want to live in that proactive state. But Olson found that some people have hyperreactive cognitive processing.
Yeah, their brains act as if every single minor change in their day is a complete, startling surprise.
And this is directly linked to the organization of their white matter, isn't it?
It is. Think of white matter as the brain's broadband infrastructure. It acts as the communication network, determining how fast and efficiently signals travel between different regions of the brain.
Okay, so what happens when it's poorly organized?
When that white matter is poorly organized or compromised, the brain struggles to filter out irrelevant stimuli. It literally cannot process complex scenarios fast enough to remain proactive.
So it just defaults to the reactive system.
Every time. This leaves a person hypervigilant, easily startled, and honestly just exhausted.
Wait, if my white matter is disorganized, am I just doomed to be a nervous wreck forever? Because telling someone they're anxious because their brain's physical wiring is frayed sounds incredibly defeating.
I get that. It is a hardware issue, but the human brain is highly upgradable.
Oh, thank goodness.
The research points directly to moderate to vigorous physical activity, specifically aerobic exercise, as the primary tool for this upgrade.
We aren't just talking about a casual stroll then.
No, we mean getting the heart rate up significantly through running, cycling, or swimming.
What is that intense physical stress actually doing to the white matter?
Well, vigorous aerobic exercise dramatically increases blood flow. That delivers a huge surge of oxygen and neurotrophic factors like BDNF directly to the brain.
I've heard of BDNF. It's basically fertilizer for your neurons, right?
That's exactly what it is. It facilitates neuroplasticity and actually improves the integrity of the myelin sheath.
And the myelin sheath is the insulation wrapping around your white matter tracts.
Yes. By thickening that insulation, you increase the speed and efficiency of your brain's communication network. You are physically building a brain capable of staying in that calm, proactive state.
Okay, so we can optimize the white matter and build a highly proactive brain. But, that optimized brain still has to deal with genuinely awful situations.
Oh, definitely. Life still happens.
Right. A proactive brain still gets fired or experiences a terrible breakup or deals with illness. How do we intellectually frame the uncontrollable elements of life so they don't drag us right back into panic?
This is where we transition from the biological hardware to the psychological software. The therapy group of DC outlines a framework called radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance, which means fully acknowledging reality exactly as it is.
Exactly as it is, without judgment, without fighting it, and without pretending it's something different.
Fighting reality is like getting caught in a rainstorm and screaming at the clouds that it shouldn't be raining instead of just opening an umbrella. You're still getting wet, but now you're also exhausted and angry.
That's a great way to put it. What's fascinating here is that the psychology can actually be broken down into an equation. Pain multiplied by resistance equals suffering.
Pain times resistance equals suffering.
Yes, pain is an inevitable part of the human experience. Loss, disappointment, physical injury, those are going to happen. But suffering is entirely optional.
Suffering is what happens when you add resistance to the pain.
Exactly. When you burn cognitive energy raging against the facts, insisting that things should be different than they objectively are.
I think it's crucial to clarify what radical acceptance is not, though. It is not approval. Accepting that a business venture failed doesn't mean you are happy about it.
Right.
And it is definitely not passivity.
Far from it. Resistance is a massive cognitive tax. Every ounce of energy you spend wishing a situation was different is energy siphoned away from actual problem solving.
So acceptance is about recovering that wasted energy.
Yes. You cannot effectively change a situation until you look at it with absolute, brutal clarity.
The Stoics were practicing this thousands of years before modern psychology even gave it a name. Our daily Stoic sources detail specific mental exercises designed to strip away that resistance.
Their methods are so incredibly practical.
They really are. One of the most powerful is the view from above. You close your eyes and imagine zooming out from your physical body up to the clouds, observing your neighborhood, your city, and eventually the entire globe.
It acts as an immediate perspective shift. When you visualize the sheer scale of human activity, traffic jams, scientific breakthroughs, arguments, and global conflicts all happening simultaneously, it recalibrates your threat detection.
It reminds your brain that the problem feeling entirely insurmountable in your living room is actually only relatively important in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly.
They also utilized negative visualization to combat hedonic adaptation. Because we are biologically wired to get used to our baseline, no matter how good it is.
We really are. We start taking our health, our homes, and our partners completely for granted.
So negative visualization requires you to deliberately imagine losing everything you value. You vividly imagine never having met your spouse or, your home burning to the ground.
I know it sounds incredibly morbid, but the psychological effect is profound. By artificially dropping your baseline to zero in your mind, you reset your brain's dopamine and gratitude response to what you already possess.
When you open your eyes, your ordinary mundane life suddenly feels intensely valuable again.
It's an instant reset.
There's also the stripping method, which involves peeling back the layers of a stressful situation like an onion. Most of our anxiety doesn't actually come from the core event.
No, it comes from the outer layers of ego and social perception, like what will people think of me, or how does this impact my status?
The stripping method forces you to discard those external narratives until you find the objective core reality. It allows you to base your next move on your actual ethics, rather than just protecting your ego.
So Stoicism and radical acceptance provide the mental clarity needed to figure out your next move. But deciding to act and actually executing that action day after day.
Those are two very different challenges.
Absolutely. The brain strongly prefers its deeply rooted default pathways. How do we bypass that neurological resistance to actually change our daily behaviors?
This requires us to dissect the mechanics of human behavior using Charles Duhigg's work on habit loops. We all know the basic structure by now. A cue triggers the brain, a routine is executed, and a reward reinforces the behavior.
Right, the classic loop.
If I walk past a specific coffee shop, that's the cue. I go in and buy a massive sugary pastry, that's the routine. The dopamine hit from the sugar is the reward.
And eventually, just seeing the sign for the coffee shop triggers a physical craving.
That's exactly. So the golden rule of habit change isn't about destroying that deeply ingrained loop. It's about hijacking it.
Because you cannot easily extinguish a powerful cue or a deeply felt craving. To alter the behavior, you must keep the cue the same, keep the reward the same, but insert a completely new routine.
Which is the entire neurological foundation of organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes, it's a perfect example. The cue, like stress or social anxiety, remains. The desired reward relief and a sense of calm remains. But the routine shifts from consuming alcohol to attending a meeting, sharing with a group, or calling a sponsor.
You are satisfying the old craving with new neurocircuitry. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. How do we tackle the massive, seemingly impossible habits?
Duhigg's research points to keystone habits. These are specific, highly leveraged behaviors that, when altered, start a chain reaction that transforms entirely unrelated patterns.
It's a keystone habit that just knocks down the rest of the dominoes.
Exactly. A perfect example is Paul O'Neill taking over as CEO of the Alcoa Corporation. The company was struggling, and investors expected a speech about synergy, profit margins, and cost cutting.
The usual corporate jargon.
Right. But instead, O'Neill announced that his singular priority was worker safety. The stockholders were terrified and immediately tried to dump their shares.
But O'Neill understood the mechanics of a keystone habit. Why did focusing on safety inadvertently cause profits to skyrocket?
Well, because to make the factory safer, the entire corporate hierarchy had to learn how to communicate without fear.
And that improved communication allowed them to identify flaws in the manufacturing process. Fixing the manufacturing process caused product quality to soar, which drove costs down.
One keystone habit dismantled the entire toxic culture. It's brilliant.
On an individual level, what would be the ultimate keystone habit?
The ultimate keystone habit is willpower. And the crucial insight here is that willpower is not a genetic trait or a finite resource you are simply born with. It is a trainable habit.
Like how Starbucks handles their massive workforce. They employ thousands of young people, often in their very first jobs.
And they have to train them to handle highly stressful, angry customers without losing their composure.
They don't just tell them to be polite. They use the Latte method, which trains employees to identify inflection points.
Yes. An inflection point is the precise moment when willpower is statistically most likely to fail, like a customer screaming because their order is wrong.
So Starbucks provides blank pages in their training manuals, requiring employees to write out their exact response to that specific inflection point before it ever happens.
By preloading the routine before the cue ever occurs, they bypass the need for real-time decision-making.
When the customer yells, the employee doesn't have to scramble their reactive brain to figure out what to do. The proactive routine is already installed and automatic.
It's habit hijacking at its finest.
But when are humans actually malleable enough to install these massive changes? Because changing deep routines is grueling work.
It is, but both organizations and individuals are most susceptible to habit change during a crisis.
A crisis?
Yeah, a crisis physically shatters default neural pathways. Take the Rhode Island Hospital or the London Underground. Both institutions suffered from deeply toxic routines regarding communication, where subordinates were terrified to speak up to their superiors, even when noticing catastrophic mistakes.
And it took tragic, fatal surgical errors at the hospital and a devastating, deadly fire in the subway for those rigid institutional habits to unfreeze.
Exactly. The sheer turmoil of a crisis creates the neurological flexibility required for profound change.
Corporate algorithms are entirely built around this concept. Target uses predictive analytics to track when their customers are going through major life events, like having a baby or moving to a new city.
Because a major life transition shatters your daily routine, making your brand loyalty totally vulnerable.
Target identifies that crisis point and floods you with custom marketing, deliberately manipulating your new shopping habits before they have a chance to solidify. They know you are most programmable when your life is in flux.
It's wild to think about. But all of these interventions we've discussed, the breath work, the physical exercise to build white matter, the cognitive load of radical acceptance, the hijacking of habit loops, they require an immense amount of physical and mental energy.
So where does that energy come from?
It brings us to the absolute bedrock of human biology, sleep hygiene.
Sleep. The abundance therapy research makes it clear that sleep is not just a passive state of rest. It is active, aggressive neurological maintenance.
Completely. When you are sleep deprived, the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, becomes up to 60% more reactive to negative stimuli.
60%.
60%. It is the equivalent of your brain's smoke detector suddenly being triggered by just a speck of dust. Simultaneously, the prefrontal cortex, which serves as your logical brake system and handles impulse control, is severely impaired.
You are literally stripping your brain of its physical ability to regulate emotion. But how are you supposed to sleep when you're stressed out trying to change all these massive habits we just talked about? You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything you need to fix.
Well, it is a vicious bidirectional relationship. Poor sleep causes emotional volatility, and emotional volatility destroys sleep architecture.
So how do you break it?
To sever that loop, you have to enforce strict, non-negotiable sleep hygiene. This means implementing a technology curfew to prevent blue light from suppressing melatonin. It means utilizing the bed exclusively for sleep and intimacy.
So no watching TV or working in bed.
None. And if you cannot fall asleep after 20 minutes, you must physically leave the bed. If you stay, your brain begins to associate the physical mattress with the stress of insomnia.
I find the strategy of scheduling worry time to be incredibly effective for this. If your brain insists on looping through tomorrow's problems, you don't fight it, but you don't do it in bed either.
Exactly.
You set a specific window earlier in the evening to write down every catastrophic thought and actionable plan. You externalize the cognitive loop onto paper, giving your brain permission to release it before your head hits the pillow.
You are systematically removing the cognitive interference that disrupts the sleep cycles, which in turn provides your brain with the neurochemical balance required to actually execute all the complex psychological framing we discussed.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started at the absolute bottom, using the physiological thigh and grounding techniques to force a hard reboot of your nervous system in the midst of acute panic.
We moved to the physical hardware, using aerobic exercise to thicken the myelin sheath and build a brain capable of proactive processing.
We installed new software using radical acceptance and stoic visualization to eliminate the cognitive tax of resisting reality. We bypassed the brain's resistance to change by hijacking the cue and reward loop to install new keystone habits.
And finally, we protected the entire system by defending our sleep architecture so the amygdala doesn't hijack the whole process.
So what does this all mean?
Well, when you synthesize all of these sources, a very stark reality emerges. We discussed how Target utilizes algorithms to track your vulnerability during major life events, and how organizations only rewrite their most toxic routines in the wake of a crisis.
Right.
This implies something fundamental about human nature. During the most chaotic, stressful, and painful moments of your life, a personal crisis or a massive transition, your deeply entrenched habit loops are shattered, unlocked, and completely vulnerable.
They're up for grabs.
Exactly. So the question you have to mull over is this. During your next major personal crisis, when your brain is at its most neuroplastic and flexible, are you going to use that brief window to deliberately rewrite your own keystone habits? Or are you going to leave your vulnerable mind wide open for corporate algorithms, marketers, and the chaos of your environment to rewrite them for you?
You don't have to stay stuck in the reactive scramble. You have the blueprint to rebuild the machinery. You just have to decide to use it.